Hi everybody, I'm Doug.
I'm Joy.
And this is the recap for week 1 of Intermediate Balboa, December 2016, Wednesday Night Hop. And this is the Out and In secret menu. So we started with a review of Out and Ins.
And this time we pointed out that our positioning, although we often practice as square, is not truly square, but is actually in a V. So if Doug is kind of doing his out and ins straight forward, so like on these tiles, I'm actually kind of going diagonally to him.
Yeah, if you just see my arm moving by itself, the really natural position for me to move my arm is out here. Doing this is actually sort of restrictive. It pulls your right shoulder over to the side. So just to be clear, if you look and see how my body is slanted in how it's moving in relation to the tile, and then if we do it together, out and in, out and in, out and in. And this is actually what we did next, is we started adding 180 pivots on the in. We had practiced rotating during our out and ins, but we had never quite tried a full 180 on these rotational pivots.
Yeah, and we talked about kind of the follow's responsibility, and this is maintaining flow. So as he comes around, I want to follow through on that rotation, and that in general, as a follower, I never let a lead kill my flow. So even if the lead is being very juddery, I want to flow through everything and keep it very kind of smooth and continuous.
Yeah, and even though the core of that pivot comes on that very last beat, out, out, in, pivot, out, out, in, pivot, when we're doing it, it doesn't look staccato like this. So as I say, out, out, in, pivot, out, out, in, pivot, out, in, pivot, out, in, pivot, like what we're doing together still looks like it has a lot of flow and circularity to it. So that's something to aim for in your out and ins as you move across the floor, is aim for flow in those in moments.
Mm-hmm. And so the reason we want to maintain this flow is because the next thing we got to was
out, in,
maintain.
Out, in. So using this 180 pivot to go straight into toss outs.
Yeah, and so in these, do you want to talk about leads first?
No.
So in these, he sets up that rotation, and I want to, here, let's do it slow-mo, and I take that rotation, and I really continue it through all the way through to my hips. So if you notice, I am stepping straight down on my right foot and twisting with the hips, and I'm not stepping out. I'm also, whereas normally, so we talked about kind of follow frame and follow stretch. So follow frame, I generally keep my frame around here. Any deformation out of that frame, I will resist more and more. So as I twist in, I'll give you a hand for how much stretch there is. So here, right. So as I twist more into that, there's more stretch here. If I did not do that, and I were to kind of leave a limp arm, this is what would happen. And I would just wrap up into my own arm. And if I do that, then Doug has nothing to work with to get me to stretch and unwrap. Yeah, so it's my responsibility to, one, continue holding his hand and really resist that motion the more I twist into it. And when he lets go, I let go. And that gives me the stretch to bounce around.
So leaders, what I'm doing as we build up that stretch is I am moving away a little bit in order to be an anchor for that stretch. So as Joy's wrapping into herself, I wrap into myself as well, but primarily I'm actually just sort of moving my body and my elbow and my hand with it back a few inches to really create that sense of dynamic in that stretch, so that when we let go, there's a nice turn that happens. And so we don't have to throw the hand through space. If we're doing this right, I can just let go and Joy goes straight in. So we use that to do something a little bit different, since you've probably done those things already. We did a leader moving across back to out and ins. So the cool thing about this move is when Joy wraps up right here, I'm asking her to walk back through me where I am. Hoo, hoo, ha. And then we go into out and ins on the other side. And it's all this really smooth, flowy motion. So that's what we were aiming for. And that's really dependent on getting a really nice
Rotation.
pivot through.
Continue.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I didn't
But
actually
follow
do it.
through.
And then leaders have to, instead of just releasing that stretch, they have to move their body, not just my arm, but my whole body back into the right before I release that stretch. And that's what gives Joy that feeling of going forward.
Yeah, and we talked about for Balboa follows, the default way to translate momentum is rotationally and on the spot. So my default would be this kind of in-place turn. It's only when he gives a very distinct linear stretch to it, then I move down the line. But even so, so for Lindy, if I'm following Lindy, like you give me a little linear and I would move a lot farther down the line. But for Bal, it's a lot more like resisting and really wanting to stay on one spot while turning. And then follower tech. Oh, did you have one more point? And then so we also talked about follow technique for spins, where you really want to stand very straight. So you don't want to kind of spin wonky, so this will throw your balance off. Also, I keep my balance very kind of on one spot. So when I spin, I'm on one spot rather than kind of taking really large steps or keeping my stance wide. And this kind of causes me to move across the floor in an unexpected manner. And also any momentum, either rotational or linear that I get from Doug, I try to translate that and then keep that continuous and consistent. So me keeping that consistent will enable him to really be able to tell where I'm going to go next. Versus if I kind of like go really fast and then really slow, he doesn't really know. So my responsibility is really keep it consistent, try to feel where he's directing honestly.
Cool. Yeah. So, and then the final note was just a reminder to like look out for the people who dance bow and social dance bow on the floor. Even if it's not like a bow specific venue, the best way to learn this dance is to social dance it. So, ask me to bow, ask Joy to bow, ask all your fellow students to bow, and it'll be awesome. So, thank you. See you next week.